He walked in like he always did, quiet, careful, polite, shirt tucked, boots dusty from work, callous hands holding that folded check like it was something sacred. Isaiah Reed was only 18, but he carried himself like a man who already knew the rules. Walk straight, don't talk too loud, keep your head down, and make sure your smile doesn't scare anyone. The check had his name on it, signed by his boss, Harold Dobbs, the man he'd spent 6 straight days hauling lumber for. In the heat, the sweat, the splinters, a full week's pay. Isaiah waited patiently in line at the bank, hat in hand, glancing down every few seconds to make sure the ink on that paper was still real. He was thinking about his mama's rent, her light bill, a pair of shoes with no holes. What he didn't know was that somebody already decided the check didn't belong to him. 3 minutes. That's how long it took. The teller, a white woman with a stiff smile and a tighter heart, looked at the check, then looked at Isaiah, and that's all it took. She didn't ask him a question. She didn't even pick up the phone to call the man who signed it. She hit a button. Isaiah blinked. 2 officers stepped inside like they were walking into a bar fight. Turned around. One of them said he thought they were joking. He laughed, soft, nervous. "I'm sorry. You heard me, boy. Hands behind your back." It didn't feel real. He barely moved before they yanked his arms back. The cold steel bit into his wrists before the confusion even reached his mouth. I don't understand." His words cracked like they were made of glass. "You're under arrest for attempting to cash a forged check." That's when he realized they weren't there to ask. They weren't there to listen. They already decided. Outside, the sun was beating down like it had something to prove. Isaiah was walked across Main Street like a showpiece. People stared. Some turned away, and from 3 blocks down, a scream tore through the air like something dying. It was his mama, Sarah Reed. She came running from the porch barefoot, apron still on, mouth open in disbelief. "Isaiah!" The deputy pushed her back with his arm. She grabbed his sleeve. "What did he do?" "He didn't do nothing. Mom, step back. He's a good boy. That's his check. That man worked for it." Isaiah tried to speak, tried to look her in the eye, but the words never came. They shoved him into the back seat like he was something dirty, like his breath didn't matter. The door slammed shut. And in that moment, the world got small. The kind of small where you can hear your heartbeat thudding in your ears, where your fingers go numb because your body's trying to disappear. He looked down at his boots, still dusty, still his, still real. The check was gone. He didn't even know where it went. Just a folded piece of paper. But it was the last piece of proof he had, and all it took was one woman's word to say it was a lie. Welcome to Injustice Browin. I'm Mark Joie. If you've made it this far, you've already seen how fast the lie moves and how slow. The truth is allowed to walk. If this hits you in the gut, if it makes you think of someone you know, or something you've seen, go ahead and subscribe. Drop a comment too, because silence is what keeps this machine running. But stories crack the wheels. We're just getting started. The cell door shut with a sound he'd never forget. Not loud, just final, like something closing for good. Isaiah didn't cry, not at first. He sat on the concrete bench, back straight, eyes darting between the toilet and the bars. The walls were yellow with sweat stains, and the fluorescent light above never flickered, never dimmed. It just buzzed. Day and night meant nothing in there. The air was thick, stale. No clock, no window. Time became a rumor. He asked for a phone call. The deputy looked through him like he hadn't spoken. Asked again the next morning if it even was morning. Still nothing. Meals came cold. Slid through a slot in the door like he was an animal. No eye contact. No words. The second day, he stopped asking. That silence. It wasn't just around him. It was inside him. He tried to think of what he did wrong. Over and over. Every step. Every word in that bank. He hadn't even spoken more than 3 sentences. Hadn't raised his voice. Hadn't moved fast. Hadn't touched anyone. But here he was. And the only thing anyone ever said to him was face the wall or step back from the door. On the 4th day, he thought it was the 4th, a man came to see him. A sheriff. Big. Belly. Dead eyes. Voice like he chewed nails for breakfast. Isaiah stood up, hands at his sides. "Please, sir, can I talk to my mama? She don't know where She knows," the sheriff said. Isaiah froze. The man leaned in just enough to make sure it stung. "And you ought to be grateful you're still breathing, boy." Then he walked away. No lawyer, no date, no answers, just more buzzing, more silence. And somewhere across town, his mother was knocking on doors that wouldn't open. She'd gone to the bank. The teller wouldn't look her in the eye. She'd gone to Harold Dobbs, Isaiah's boss, the man who signed the check. He opened the door just wide enough to say, "I don't want trouble." She held up a photograph of Isaiah from his school graduation. "He worked for you. You gave him that check." "I don't recall." He shut the door. Isaiah was sitting on that bench when it finally hit him. He wasn't waiting for a trial. He was being forgotten. The system didn't need to beat him bloody. It just needed time, needed quiet, needed a ceiling light that never shut off and a floor that never warmed up. It needed him to give up so it wouldn't have to finish the job. And the worst part, it was working. He couldn't remember what day it was. Couldn't remember the last time he saw the sky. Couldn't remember if he'd even done anything wrong or if they just needed someone to point at. And now, they had him, a black boy with a check. That's all it took. No fingerprints, no witness, no call. Just the sound of one lock turning and everything else disappearing. Sarah Reed had seen too many lies dressed up in uniforms. She buried one brother after the war, and the other under a white man's lie that never even made the paper. And now they wanted her boy to. But Sarah wasn't built for surrender. They told her to wait. The deputies said, "It's being handled." The sheriff told her to go home, trust the process. But she already knew what the process was. She'd seen it. She lived it. She'd buried it. So she put on her shoes. The same cracked leather ones she wore to Isaiah's graduation. She didn't own pearls. Didn't have a car. Didn't carry a sign. What she had was his name. She walked to Miss Lula's house first. Knocked hard. Told her everything, how Isaiah had worked 6 days in the heat. How the check was good. How the bank never even called the man who signed it. Miss Lula listened, mouth tight, said, "You know how they are in this town." Sarah nodded. Then she walked on. The preacher at Mount Bethel Baptist didn't say much either. Just put a hand on her shoulder and said he'd pray for truth. But by the time she got to the barber shop, her voice had changed. No more shaking. No more soft pleading. She told it straight. "They locked my son up for being black with a check in his hand." The men in the shop stopped talking. The buzzers went quiet. The old man's sweeping hair looked up like he was remembering something from long ago. One of the barbers, Jerome, stood up. "You saying they didn't even ask Harold?" She shook her head. "Didn't even try." He nodded. "Once. That's all I need." By the end of that week, her story was moving without her. The words she spoke in sweat and grief were being passed from mouth to mouth. Whispered over collard greens, shouted over front porches, scribbled in church bulletins. Most folks were scared. Some turned away, but not all. In Jackson, a young lawyer named Elijah Carter heard about the boy with the check. He'd handled worse. But something in the way people kept saying the mother wouldn't stop walking, that caught his ear. He showed up in a dusty Buick with a briefcase full of paper and a face that didn't flinch. Walked right up to Sarah's porch and said, "I came to help." She didn't cry. She just pointed to the seat next to her. The next morning, he went to the county courthouse, asked for their arrest report. They handed it over like it was nothing. 3 pages, no witness statement, no verification, no contact with the employer, and the check wasn't even copied, just listed as suspected forgery. Elijah closed the file and let out a bitter laugh. They didn't even check the damn signature. That's when Sarah knew. She hadn't been begging for mercy. She'd been dragging the truth into the light, one painful step at a time, and now someone saw it. The jail hadn't released Isaiah. Not yet, but the story was no longer theirs to hide. Black mouths were moving. Black hands were organizing. Letters were being written. Questions asked, and when questions start, power starts to shake. Sarah kept walking, to the feed store, to the train station, to the teacher's lounge after school. She wasn't loud. She wasn't dramatic. She was persistent. A mother with nothing left to lose except the boy they tried to disappear. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous kind of power there is. The courtroom was cold, not from the air, but from the eyes. Every bench behind Isaiah was packed. White folks in Sunday suits. Sheriff in the back row, arms crossed. The teller sitting with her lawyer, lipstick fresh, hands folded like she was waiting for church to begin. Isaiah sat at the defense table, staring at his hands. Same hands that built fences, that hauled timber, that shook his mama's shoulders when she cried. Same hands now cuffed in every eye that looked at him. His suit didn't fit. Borrowed. Sleeves too long, pants bunching at the ankles. He didn't have money for tailoring. He had silence and a lawyer with fire in his chest. Elijah Carter stood up like he'd been standing for years. Calm voice, measured words. But his eyes, they were lit. He wasn't there to make friends. The prosecutor started first. Held up the check like it was a weapon. Said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when we let fraud slip through the cracks." He pointed at Isaiah like he was pointing at a broken pipe, like he was pointing at a thing. This young man thought he could walk into a bank, hand over a forged check, and walk out richer. Never said black. Didn't have to. Isaiah didn't flinch. He'd flinched enough. Then came the teller. She took the stand with all the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged in her life. Said Isaiah had looked suspicious. Said he stuttered when she asked a question. Said she had a feeling. Elijah didn't interrupt. He let her talk. Let her lie. The judge nodded along like he'd heard this story before and already knew the ending. Every time Elijah tried to press a question, the judge cut him off. "Stick to the facts, counselor." But Elijah knew what he was doing. He waited. Let the prosecution burn through their script. Let the courtroom lean toward guilt. Then he stood. "Your Honor," he said, "I have one question." The judge rolled his eyes. "Make it quick." Elijah walked to the center of the room, held up the arrest report in one hand and a copy of the check in the other. Why did the bank never call the man who signed this check? The room went still. The prosecutor looked confused. The teller shifted just a flicker. Elijah read the name out loud, slowly, clearly, William T. Hodges. He turned to the teller. "Mom, can you confirm who is William Hodges?" She blinked. "I assumed. You assumed it was his employer." "Yes, you assumed." "Did you read the name on the check?" Silence. He walked over to the jury. Faces pale, a few jaws tight. One woman's foot tapped faster. "William T. Hodges is not Harold Dobbs. Harold Dobbs is Isaiah Reed's employer. William T. Hodges is a white business owner in Greenville 30 miles from here who never met Isaiah in his life." He let that sit. The bank never called Hodges, never verified the signature, never even read it out loud. They saw this young man's skin and called the police. No one said a word because they all knew, every single one of them. The teller didn't make a mistake. She just made a choice. The judge cleared his throat, looking down. The prosecutor shuffled papers that didn't matter anymore. Elijah turned to Isaiah, gave a single nod. And Isaiah, for the first time in weeks, felt his breath settle. The courtroom didn't explode. It froze because the lie had been caught, not by a confession, not by outrage, but by the quiet weight of the truth, finally spoken out loud. And in that stillness, something broke, not loudly, but deeply. Isaiah walked out of that jail without a word. No cheers, no apologies, just a quiet door sliding open and a guard shove. "You got lucky, that's all." No one said. They were sorry for stealing days from him, for stealing his peace, or for the fear he carried home like a scar. He looked at the sun for the first time in what felt like forever. But the light didn't feel the same. The town didn't feel the same either. The bank where it all began closed its doors a year later. No ribbon cutting, no press release, just empty windows and a silence heavier than before. The teller moved north, leaving behind nothing but a name and a story she tried to forget. Isaiah never stepped inside a bank again, never handed over a check. He took cash, always cash, because trust was something he learned the hard way, like pain in his bones. But the town, his name was everywhere, whispered in corners, a warning in the air, a small stone in the shoe of injustice no one could shake loose. Sarah Reed kept telling the story, not for fame or pity, for memory, for justice. Slow as it might be, she told it to neighbors, to strangers, to anyone who would listen. Isaiah's fight wasn't over. It never really is. Freedom doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it just looked like survival. And for Isaiah Reed, that was everything. Isaiah Reed's story isn't just history, it's now. It shows us how the tools of injustice aren't always guns or chains. Sometimes it's a pen, a careless lie, a system ready to believe the worst without proof. Look around. Bank accounts still get closed, loans denied, job applications ignored, all because someone, somewhere, made a choice not to see a person but a stereotype. Isaiah's name isn't just a story from Mississippi in the past. It's a warning A reminder that injustice wears many faces and some are quiet. So next time you hear someone say, "That wasn't fair," don't walk away. Listen harder, ask questions, speak up, because silence lets the lie grow. Remember Isaiah Reed. Tell his name, because when we forget, the story begins again, and we all lose. This is Mark Schwab, and you're watching Injustice Browning. If Isaiah's story moved you, subscribe, share, and tell us what you think in the comments. Let's make sure no one's name disappears in silence.